All right, Shalom, Shalom, Israel, Shalom to the Torah tribes of Yasha Allah. This, Salakia. This is your brother Yasha Allah, right? Coming back to y'all with yet another video through the spirit and power of Yahawah BAHASHAM Mashak Yahushua. I'd like to give all honor, glory, and praise, of course, unto Yahawah BAHASHAM Mashak Wamalak Yahushua. All right, so we're about to get straight into this, right? Now, this is going into the eunuchs in the Bible, right? Basically, in-depth breakdown of what a eunuch is, what was their place, and basically where they lived and stuff like that, right? We're going to get into the scriptures. We're going to get into some history and the Greek, Slacky, not the Greek, but the Hebrew, right? All that stuff, right? Lord willing. So after this video, you should have a basic understanding of what a eunuch is and how they're mentioned in the scriptures, right? Because we have to relate these things in the scriptures. You know what I'm saying? So the eunuch, right? Let's kick it off. All right. Let's kick it off with the definition real quick. All right, we'll kick it off with that. So let's get the definition of what a eunuch is, right? Because this might be the first time of you hearing this word, right? The hell is a eunuch? So let's get that. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Let you know what a eunuch is. All right. So let's get this. Eunuch, right? It says a man, right? It says a man who has been castrated. Now, what is castrated, right? Now, you castrated, all right? Basically, just to put it in simple terms, is when a man's, genital, right, gets cut off, right? That's what it means to be castrated. And you can look that up for yourself. But, just to put that out there, because that's what a eunuch is, right? A man who has been castrated, right? Because let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23 and verse 1. It says, he that is wounded in the stones or have his privy member cut off. Now, you can already guess what that privy member is, right? That's cut off. It says, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. You see that? So a man that has been castrated, he's not allowed to be in the congregation of the Lord because his privy member has been cut off, right? And you can look up what that means, right? But it says a man who has been castrated, especially in the past, because remember, this Bible was written thousands and thousands of years ago. So this is applied to the past, right? One employed to guard the woman's living areas at an oriental court. You see that? So basically, eunuchs had certain offices, right? Eunuchs had certain offices and jobs to do, right? And we're going to get into that, Lord willing. All right. They had certain offices and jobs to do, and a eunuch in general, is just a man that has been castrated, right? In general. But when we see it in times past in ancient and how eunuchs were used in the ancient world, basically they would have a certain task, right? Or tasks. All right. So let's go to the Hebrew on this. And we see the word castrated. It's like you're not castrated, but eunuch. All right. Let's go to this. So you should see my screen. So let's scroll down to this. So this is the word for eunuch, right? Now let's get a verse on this. Let's get a verse where this word is applied, right? I believe we can go to we can go to Khan. So let's kick it off with Daniel, right? Let's kick it off with Daniel. I'm gonna share my screen, but I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it from a book. All right. It's the book of Daniel, chapter 1. It's the book of Daniel, chapter 1. And verse, I'm gonna start at 1. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Joachim, the king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, onto Jerusalem and besieged it. Now you can read about that for yourself and look that up, about the sieges of Jerusalem that Nebuchadnezzar did, right? Nebuchadnezzar II. Verse 2, and the Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand, which part of the vessels of the house of the Most High, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels unto the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, right, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning, and knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. You see that? So the king wanted certain people, certain men to work for him, to work in the king's palace. And that was a heavy lot, right? That was a heavy job, right? But, kings, we're going to get into this, but kings would have certain regiments, right? Regiment or regents, right? Slovakia regents that would have control over a certain part, right? Maybe at the king's house or the women's courts, like we read as in the definition of a eunuch, right? And so the master of the eunuchs, you see that? Now that word for eunuch right there, all right, the word for eunuch right there is Strong's H 5631, right? Let's see how he pronounces it.
Strong's H 5631, Saris.
Right, so Saris, right? If you didn't hear it, that's how it's pronounced, right? It says from an unused root meaning to castrate. You see that? Castrate, official, eunuch. So this is the outline of biblical usage. It's used as official as well as eunuch, right? Now it says from an unused root meaning to castrate, and eunuch, by implication, valid, especially of the female apartments. Now, what is a valid? A valid is what? Basically, it says a man's personal male attendant responsible for his clothes and appearance. A valid, right? I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. Let me see.
Valet,
right? Valet. Con. And it says, and thus a minister of state, chamberlain, eunuch, officer. And these words, chamberlain, eunuch, officer, are relatable, right? They're similar, and they're used similarly in the scriptures, right? Now it says, especially of the female compartments, because you had eunuchs that would have control of certain female compartments and apartments in the ancient world. Now, why the eunuchs? And why the eunuchs? Because, the king didn't want basically these men to mess around with his women. You see that? In a sexual way. So that's why they had that their thing cut off, right? And that's why they were castrated, right? Oh, so lucky, I wasn't sharing the screen, right? So let me show you this real quick. It says from an unused root meaning to castrate, a eunuch by implication, valet, especially of the female apartments, and thus a minister of state, chamberlain, eunuch, officer. You see that? And you can look this up for yourself as well, right? It says a eunuch, when castrated, it says such as the Eastern kings were accustomed to set over the care of their women. You see that? And we can read about that in Esther 2 and 3, as well as the other verses, right? In that. It says in other offices of the court. So, and Daniel, right? Daniel and also the three holy children, they were eunuchs, I believe, right? Daniel for sure. Daniel was a eunuch. And so he had to be made a eunuch, right? But he still had control over the king's palace, right? He was under Nebuchadnezzar, right? But Daniel, he had a lot of power, right? But he wasn't allowed to have kids or a wife, right? That's the thing. He wasn't allowed to have kids or wife because he had to be control. He had to be in control over the king's palace, right? And let's get that real quick. When we read about that, about the eunuch, let's read about the eunuch real quick. I just want to see if I'm sharing the screen. All right, so let's read about this. Okay, so eunuch, right? Generally, a eunuch, a man that has been castrated, right? Now it says, let's see here. Right, so it says eunuchs would usually be servants or slaves who have been castrated to make them reliable servants of a royal court where physical access to the ruler could wield great influence. You see that? Seemingly lowly domestic functions, such as making the ruler's bed, bathing him, cutting his hair, carrying him in his litter, or even relaying messages, could in theory give a eunuch the ruler's ear and impart de facto power on the formerly humble but trusted servant. You see that? These eunuchs, they're trusted servants, right? And they're also slaves. All right, they're also slaves as well, because Daniel, hey, he was a slave to Babylon, right? Because let's get this prophecy. Let's go to the book of 2 Kings. All right. Let's get this. I believe this is 2 Kings, right? Chapter 20. All right, let me look at my notes. This is the book of 2 Kings, chapter 20 and verse 18. It says, "And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." They shall be eunuchs in the king of Babylon. So that is a prophecy that the Most High is giving Isaiah, the prophet, right? That Israel's sons will be eunuchs in the king's palace, right? In Nebuchadnezzar's palace. And the prophecy came to pass. Daniel, and I believe the three holy children were also eunuchs, right? Under King Nebuchadnezzar, right? King Nebuchadnezzar, right? So let's keep reading in this. It says eunuchs supposedly did not generally have loyalties to the military, their aristocracy, or a family of their own. So they couldn't even have a family of their own, right? Having neither offspring nor in-laws at the very least. See that? They were thus seen as more trustworthy and less interested in establishing a private dynasty. They weren't trying to overthrow the king, right? They couldn't establish a private dynasty because they had no family relations. They had no kids. They had no wife, right? They really didn't have any family to connect to, you know? It says because their condition usually lowered their social status, they could also be easily replaced or killed without repercussion. In the case of Daniel, though, when you read Daniel, Daniel was a very wise servant, right? Because let's go to this book of Daniel. You know, the Nebuchadnezzar couldn't just kill Daniel, right? He could have, but you would have lost a great asset, right? Because when we go to Daniel chapter 1 and verse 4, it says, "Children in whom was no blemish." Hey, Daniel, he didn't have any blemish. He was blameless, right? But well favored and skillful in all wisdom. Daniel had a lot of wisdom, right? And cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. You see that? And who are they? Verse 6. "Now among these were of the children of Judah Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah." So you have the three holy children, which are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and you also have Daniel, right? Verse 7, "Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego." You see that? So, you know, they were given Babylonian names, just like how we were given Babylonian names in this modern day Babylon, right? Because so Daniel, in the case of Daniel, he was one of the best eunuchs. All right, so I'm going to skip down to here. Now, real quick, I want to get the definition, or slacking out the definition, but the etymology. Now, the etymology of the word, it comes from the Greek eune, and then eunuchos, right, or whatever how you pronounce it. When it says bedroom guard, right, it says bedroom guard, so it literally means bedroom guard, right? You know, one who guards the bedroom. right? Because remember, they were originally used to what? Be governed over women's apartments. You see that? Because they were trusted. These guys were trusted because they couldn't impregnate anybody, right? Because let's get this in the book of Sirach, right? Let's get this in the book of Sirach. That's why when you read this, Sirach chapter 30 and verse 24, or Sirach 30 and 20, right? I'm going to start at 19. What good doth the offering unto an idol? For neither can it eat nor smell. So is he that is persecuted of the Lord. Verse 20, he seeth with his eyes and groaneth as an eunuch that embraceth a virgin and sigheth. You see that? So the eunuch will embrace a virgin, but can't do anything because he was castrated. You see that? And so he sighs, right? Because how the Lord says, because there's sorrows to being a eunuch, right? There's sorrows to being a eunuch. You know, you're denying pleasure. You're denying having kids. You're denying having a wife, right? Now we're about to get into this real quick, right? Let's go to the book of Matthew. I'm gonna just pull it. It's the book of Matthew, chapter 19 and verse 12. For there, I'm gonna start at verse 10. His disciples say unto him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry, right? Verse 11, but he said unto them, all men cannot receive the same, save they to whom it is given. Verse 12, for there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb. Exactly. So you have eunuchs that are born from their mother's womb, meaning that from birth they couldn't, reproduce, right? From birth, right? And there were some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men. So there were some eunuchs that were made eunuchs of men, meaning that what? Men would castrate them, right? If you don't know what castrate means, look that up, right? They would castrate them on purpose. Because when you go to the history real quick, and being a eunuch is also a punishment, right? Because let's go to this history. It says castration was sometimes punitive. Punitive meaning pertaining to a punishment, right? Under Assyrian law, because remember, we went into slavery under the Assyrians, right? It says under Assyrian law, homosexuality acts were punished by castration. So men would be made eunuchs by punishment because of homosexual acts. Now we know that, that's, you're supposed to be punished for homosexuality. The punishment that we have, right, that the Most High gave us is death, right? Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13, right? But they, the Assyrians, they did it a little different. They just castrated the people, right? The men that did that. All right. So So let's go back to this. So there were some eunuchs that were born of men. They were just naturally born like that. There were also some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, right? Salakia, there are eunuchs that were born naturally as a eunuch, right? They can't reproduce, right? And then two, there's eunuchs that were made of men because, men castrated them, right? And what? And there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. So there's some eunuchs that has made themselves eunuchs, has sacrificed having a wife, having kids for the Lord, right? So that they can go harder for the Lord, right? So that's what happened. That's what some men do. They deny these having a wife. They deny having kids on purpose so that they can go harder for the Lord, right? We've seen multiple examples of that, right? We've seen multiple examples of that. For example, let's go to the book of 1 Corinthians. It's the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 1. Right? It says, now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. So Paul said it's good for a man not to touch a woman. Now, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that you're going off if you marry? Right? You're going off if you do that. No, you're not going off. Paul is just saying that, look, he would want men, right, to basically go wholeheartedly for the Lord, right? But Peter, he had a wife, right? The other apostles, they had a wife, right? But Paul, he didn't, right? Verse 2, it says, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, in order for you to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Verse 3, right? Osalaki, I'm not going to go through this whole chapter out. I just want to highlight a few verses. Verse 7, for I would that all men were even as I myself, but every man have his proper gift of the Most High, one after this manner and another after that. So Paul said, hey, if it was up to me, all men would be like me, right? Just going hard for the Lord, right? Denying these pleasures, denying having kids, denying having a wife, you know. But hey, he said, look, every man has his proper gift of the Most High, right? Let's skip down to verse 31. It says, and they that use this world as not abusing it, for the fashion of this world passeth away. Paul, he realizes that, hey, all this is about to pass away. You know what I'm saying? So I got to go hard, right? And a wife could basically, in a sense, slows you down, right? Why? Let's keep reading. Verse 32. But I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried carry for the things that belong to the Lord, how ye may please the Lord. But he that is married care for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. You see that? So when you're unmarried, hey, you're more focused on the truth. You're thinking about the commandments, you're teaching and making videos, you're diligent, you're going hard, right? But now that, if you marry and you have a wife, now your life is not just going hard for the Lord. Now you have a wife and you have to entertain her and you have to render unto her due benevolence, right? You read about that in the earlier verses, right? You have to love her as your own self, like it says in the book of Ephesians. You have to give her love. So now that she's in your life, you have to also give her love and attention and time. So that's less time that's given to the Lord. You see that? Verse 34. There is difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and spirit. But she that is married careth for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. You see that? So the married woman, her mind is focused, on the Lord too. But now that she's married, her mind is also focused on her husband as well, because she has to serve her husband, right? And so with the unmarried woman, but the unmarried woman, she doesn't have a husband, so she doesn't have to serve him, right? She serves the Most High, right? And she's able to study more and go harder for the Lord, right? Well, Paul is saying that, look, it's not bad for you to marry, right? That's not bad. That's not a sin. You're not going off, but it's just less time that you could have gave to the Lord. Now you're giving it to your spouse, right? That's all he's saying. All right. So so that's an example. And Paul, Salakia. Okay, Salakia, right? All right, so so let's get back into this. Cybrack, let's get this about the unit. So you can make, not saying that Paul, actually had his privy member cut off, because remember he does talk about, lust and in Romans chapter 7 and Romans 8 about the lust and the flesh, right? The lust of the flesh and the mind and the carnal mind is enmity with the Most High and stuff like that. He does talk about, sinning by these things, right? He talks about fornication and all these things. So we're not sure if Paul was castrated, right? He doesn't say that he was castrated, but I'm just using him as an example of what a eunuch would do, abstaining from having a wife or abstaining from, having kids and, having a wife and all that, just so he or she can go harder for the Lord, right? Now, a woman can't be a eunuch because, a eunuch is when you're castrated, right? But let's go to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 16. Now, Jeremiah, he wasn't a eunuch either, but he wasn't allowed to have kids or a wife, right? Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 2. Thou shalt not take thee a wife, neither shalt thou have sons nor daughters in this place. So the Lord said to Jeremiah to not have a wife, right? He couldn't have a wife. He couldn't have kids, right? Let's go to the book of Salakia, Sirach chapter 20, verse 4. There's sorrows with being a eunuch. You know what I'm saying? Sirach chapter 20, verse 4. As is the lust of a eunuch to deflower a virgin. So a eunuch is full of lust, right? If his mind is bad, you know what I'm saying? He's full of lust. He wants to deflower a virgin, right? You can kind of figure out what that means. It says, so is he that executed judgment with violence. You see that? All right, so I have some other precepts. Let's go to the book of Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 3. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 3, and verse 14. And blessed is the eunuch which with his hands have wrought no iniquity, nor imagine wicked things against the Most High. For unto him shall be given the special gift of faith, and an inheritance in the temple of the Lord more acceptable to his mind. You see that? The eunuch. It says, blessed is the eunuch, which with his hands have wrought no iniquity. And he's not dealing with any woman, man. Right? He's not dealing with any woman. His mind is always stayed on the Most High, right? On YAHAWASHI, right? His mind is always stayed on getting the kingdom, right? He goes hard for the Lord. It says, blessed is a eunuch. You see that? It says, for unto him shall be given the special gift of faith. That might boost your faith right there, being a eunuch, right? Because you're always praying. You're always in the midst of prayer. You're not going out you're not going out to the movies with your wife. You're not going out to eat, right? You're always on fire for the Most High, right? Just constantly, doing the work of the Most High. All right. So, Salaki, I had some other things written down, right? Now let's go to this. Share my screen. I'm gonna close out in a few. All right. So when we go to this, let's have a reject. All right, so it says eunuchs sometimes were used as regents for underage heirs to the throne. So what is a regent? Let's get this about the regent. So a regent, right, is a person appointed to govern a state, right, for the time being. Oh, Salakia. For the time being, a governing state pro tempore, because a regent monarch is absent, abdicated the throne, right, is incapacitated, Salakia, or dead, or unable to discharge the powers and duties of the monarchy. You see that? So a regent, all right, a regent. And that's what, basically people in the scriptures that were eunuchs were regents, all right? they had control over a certain state, or maybe a palace or stuff like that. In the case of Daniel, it was the palace, stuff like that, right? So let's see if I had any other precepts written down about this eunuch, right? It says you can read about this, all throughout the scriptures, right? You can find it in the Old Testament as well as so-called New Testament, right? But that's really what I wanted to get. All right, that's really what I want to get. So with that, I'd like to give all honor, glory, and praise unto YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, Lord willing, this was edifying. All right, Shalom.